Hey, it's Aaron Kushler and welcome to another video from EBSC. Today we're going to look at the question, how do I improve my squat posture? Firstly, what the hell is even squat posture in the first place? Well, squat posture is basically what your squat looks like in relation to what's considered good form or bad form. So many people are going to get told that they need to squat a certain way and that others are bad. Take CrossFit for example, they favor an Olympic style squat over a powerlifting style squat because of the inclusion of Olympic lifts. You then have everyone thinking that their squat has to look identical to those of the CrossFit Games athletes, and if they don't look exactly the same, then they're sort of doing something wrong. The problem is everyone's built slightly differently, so everyone's squat is going to look a little different. But there are a few things that you need to consider if you're wanting to improve it. First, assess your need to actually squat in the first place. Why do you need to improve it? If you've got the ability to perform a basic squat relatively pain-free and it doesn't cause you any issues, do you really need to push to the point where you're going ass to grass? Probably not. By merely assessing the training requirements of the sport or the training style that you're doing, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and frustration. If you compete in the sport of powerlifting, you only need to squat just below parallel and you need to be looking at getting your squat as strong as humanly possible. If we take a look at Olympic weightlifting, the same principle can be applied, where a full depth squat is actually going to help you more because of the receiving position of the barbell. You receive either the clean or the snatch in the bottom of that squat. So it's going to make sense to you to improve your squat overall to get you more upright. If you have goals of competing in either something like Olympic weightlifting or even CrossFit, then achieving a full depth squat is going to be important to you and you'll need to spend time making sure that it works out that way. However, if your goals are to get a bit fitter, to move well and just function a lot better, then getting a full depth squat is probably not necessary for you to achieve. Secondly, the biggest roadblock that you're probably facing right now with your squat depth is to do with your ankle flexibility. Let's take a quick look at why ankle mobility plays such a big role. So what I've done behind me in the board is drawn some little figures to illustrate the point of why it's important to look at your individual mechanics with regards to squatting. So what I've got here is 3 examples of what you might sort of see or what you might experience yourself depending on how you're built. So the first one, we've got someone who's just got pretty good mobility and they've got average lever length. So lever length we're talking about is the length of your upper leg in relation to the rest of your body. So here we can see if this is the path of where the bar is coming down. So if we draw a straight line, that's where the weight's coming down. So it's in front of the midfoot. We've got okay-ish ankle mobility that's sending our knees slightly forward. We've got an average length of our upper leg bone, so our femur, which is causing us to lean over a little bit. Then we jump across to here and we've got someone who's got really good ankle mobility and shorter femurs, which changes the dynamics. So it allows them to sit a lot more upright and keeps this in alignment. So the weight is coming straight down and it's more aligned with the spine as opposed to on an angle. And then the third one, we've got someone who's got very poor ankle mobility and they've got very long upper leg bones, so their femurs are quite long, which therefore sends their hips a lot further back, meaning that their upper torso is going to have to lean right over in order to squat and to try to achieve depth here. So as you can see, it's going to, the weight doesn't change, so this line stays the same. The only thing that's going to happen is the pivot point moves further away from there. So we're going to place more stress on the lower back. So if you find your squat looks more like this, you may notice as well, you find your lower back starts to get a little bit sore as well. So while you may be looking at this and thinking, well, if I've got longer legs, therefore I'm screwed, not necessarily. This is on the presumption that we're keeping our legs dead straight. When we are squatting, we actually push our knees out, which alters this altogether. So the further away your knees move apart, shortens this distance here. So again, it brings the torso and allows you to sit in a more upright position and also alleviates the amount of tension and stretch that you're going to have on your ankles, which I'll show you in just a sec now in this next clip. So this is an example of squatting with average mobility, so you can come down just above parallel. You can't go any lower just due to the mobility restrictions. This is if you had good ankle mobility and relatively short femurs. It'll allow you to squat all the way down and to stay relatively upright. And this is what would happen if you had really bad ankle mobility and really long upper legs, so the femurs. You'd have to squat and lean right over. So this is what I was talking about with the knees being pushed out. As I push my knees out, my hips drop further down and forward, so changing the angles completely. From the side, you get a bit more of a view as to how it shifts the angles. So as I push my knees out, my hips can come forward and down. All right, so this release technique, we're just going to take a lacrosse ball, and what we're going to do is sit yourself on a box, and you're going to bring your leg up like so. And what we're trying to do is release all the tension in and around your ankle so that it frees up the movement that your ankle actually has. So you're going to place this ball on the ground, or on the top of the box, I should say, and just move your leg up and down the side there, and already that's pretty tight. You're going to feel a lot of tightness through this area. And then once you're here and you've got a sort of a sore spot, grab your foot with your opposite hand and start to actually move it and find any of those sore spots, and then stay on it until it releases, and then keep moving it. And over time, you're going to find that you're going to actually have more range as you stretch out these muscles here and release all that tension. So that's the first one that we're going to start with. So you'll spend about 30 seconds to a minute on each leg before you move on. So the second one we're going to do is actually a stretch. So now we've spent time releasing a lot of the tension in our ankle. Now we're actually going to put our knee into the position that we're going to find at the bottom of the squat and allow our ankle to stretch forward. And how we're going to do that is we're going to accentuate that in a lunge stance, and then we're going to grab a kettlebell and place it on top of our knee, making sure that our knees are actually out at the same time. And then we're going to let the weight of the kettlebell push our knee forward, keeping our heel on the ground, and allow a stretch through the Achilles tendon there. And we're just going to hold this for about 30 seconds to a minute on each leg. So the last part to this is actually to retrain the movement. Now, it's one thing to release the tight muscles, which we did with the ball, and it's another thing to stretch it. But the problem is, if you're used to using one way and you're used to having poor ankle mobility and sending your hips back, you're going to keep doing the same thing because that's what your nervous system knows. So doing it this way, we're going to actually train our nervous system that new movement pattern. So when we do an air squat, we're not going to have any weights. We're just going to push our knees forward and actually let us sit into a squat position and just feel around and feel if it feels good. If not, we come up, we maybe shift our feet around just so that we find a comfortable stance, and then do a few reps to start ingraining that movement pattern. So we want to allow our knees to come forward and out, and then stand back up. Going back to real basics with this one, nothing too technical, we're just retraining the movement. Once you can do it with body weight, then of course we can start adding weight to it, and it will improve your squat over time. Lastly, there's checking your ego. If you've decided that improving your squat is important to you, then you need to work with what you have. If you can't squat pain-free or relatively comfortable with a light weight, it makes no sense to load the bar up and try to improve as you go. That's how you get injured. However, the problems come up when you're training in a group and people around you may squat differently to you. They may be a little bit ahead of you in terms of their ability to squat, and that forces you through peer pressure to put your limitations aside and load up the bar just to keep up with them. So you load up the bar and you bang out a few questionable reps. If you keep doing this long enough, you're going to start to ingrain the wrong movement pattern, and it's just going to make it harder for you in the long run to actually fix it. So use these 3 points before you do a squatting session to keep your squat form in check. First, you want to stretch any tight areas that are giving you any limitations. So maybe we're talking about the ankles here. You might have limitations in the adductors. Start to stretch these out first. Then you want to strengthen. So strengthening any of the muscles that are actually weak. For a lot of people, this is the glutes, getting the knees to come out when we squat so that we can achieve a much lower depth. And then retrain. So you want to retrain the movement. Go right back to basics with just an air squat and make sure that you're training it in the right way. Once you can let your knees come forward, if you've stretched out, you can achieve a bit lower on the depth, then start adding weight to it, and you're going to ingrain a proper movement pattern so that then when it comes time to actually doing the movement, you won't face the same issues. So there you have it. Use those tips to help you determine first whether you need to improve your squat and then how to actually go about doing it. If you found this video helpful and you got some great takeaways, do me a favor and like the video as well as subscribe to the channel so that you stay up to date with content like this that I'm going to be releasing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.